What crimes exactly did the seven deadly sins commit? In fact, all these crimes are frame-ups. Only one of them is the real culprit. First, the lion's sin of pride, Escanor. According to the lore, his strength and personality change with the rise and fall of the sun. At night, he is a timid and cowardly loser. During the day, he transforms into an arrogant god. 51 years ago, Escanor was accused of destroying villages, injuring holy knights, and even being disrespectful to the king. He was thus convicted of the sin of pride and sentenced to hanging. But in reality, all of this was caused by his inability to control his power. Second, Meliodas, the dragon's sin of wrath. Because Fraudron, in order to revive the Ten Commandments, caused the death of Meliodas' lover, Liz. Having witnessed his lover's death firsthand, he couldn't contain his anger and lost control of his power, and completely destroying an entire kingdom. Thus, Meliodas was also branded with the sin of wrath. Third, the serpent's sin of envy, Diane. Once, Diane and Matrona assisted the Knight Order in battle, but a group of despicable holy knights killed Matrona through a scheme to gain prestige, and shifted all the blame to Diane, claiming she was jealous of Matrona's power. In the end, Diane was convicted of the sin of envy by the king, and sentenced to beheading. Fourth, the grizzly's sin of sloth, King. He was once the third fairy king. Because his good friend Helbram was blinded by hatred, he continuously slaughtered humans over 500 years. As the fairy king, King failed to fulfill his supervisory duties, so he chose to voluntarily take responsibility for his friend's crimes. He was ultimately convicted of the sin of sloth by the king, and sentenced to 1,000 years of imprisonment. Fifth, the fox's sin of greed, Ban. To attain immortality, he once stole holy water from the fairy king's forest, fell in love with the holy maiden Elaine, but later, the fairy king's forest was invaded. Elaine died after choosing to feed the holy water to Ban. Thus, Ban was also framed as the murderer who killed the fairy holy maiden and stole the holy water. He was ultimately convicted of the sin of greed by the kingdom and sentenced to death. Sixth, the goat's sin of lust, Gauther. While rescuing his lover Naga, he was mistaken by the guards for the criminal who defiled and killed the princess. Thus, he was branded with the sin of lust by the kingdom and sentenced to burning at the stake. Finally, the boar's sin of gluttony, Merlin. She is the only real criminal among the seven deadly sins. To satisfy her thirst for knowledge, she manipulated the demon king and the supreme deity, nearly causing the destruction of the kingdom. Due to her endless craving for knowledge and magic power, she was thus given the title of the Sin of Gluttony.